Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Energy Panel, Moving Towards a Climate Neutral Economy, the European Union, Czech Republic, and 2050 Climate and Energy Framework. My name is Jan Mazač, and I am a member of the Center for Energy Policy of the Institute of International Relations, Prague, and I'm moderating this panel discussion. We have approximately 60 minutes only, so I try to be as quick as possible with the introduction to maintain as much time as possible for our panelists and also for your questions at the end. You might type your question in the window below the screen. However, before introducing our distinguished speakers and passing the word to them, let me begin with a couple of words on a recent energy and climate policy development. As you all know, the European Union becomes a leader in fighting the climate change through ambitious policies at home and close cooperation with its partners abroad. The European Union and its member states are also on track to meet their commitments under the Kyoto Protocol's second period through the 2020 Climate and Energy Package. The European Union has also adopted legislation to reduce emission by 40% by 2030. However, this target will soon be outdated. A few weeks ago, the European Commission, as part of its European Green Deal strategy, which has been introduced by the new Commission on December 2019, proposed to raise those targets and cut greenhouse gases emission by at least 55% by 2030. And in addition to this, 2 days ago, the European Parliament came up with even more ambitious reduction proposal. MEPs voted to update targets, calling for emission to be reduced by 60% in 2030. Since the energy sector accounts for more than 75% of the greenhouse gases emission in the European Union, its further decarbonization will be crucial. The transition of energy system, which is currently based on isolated and rigid fossil energy value chains, to integrated system where multiple and intermittent renewable or decarbonized energy carriers, infrastructure, but also consumption sectors are jointly coordinated and operated, it's undoubtedly and will be undoubtedly one of the greatest challenges of all. We convene here today to discuss some of these energy related issues and to provide you with some of our perspectives. So let me now introduce our distinguished speakers. I start with Mrs. Jitka Holubcová, a senior analyst in Net4Gas, which is the Czech gas transmission system operator. In her contribution, Jitka will address the context in which the European Union decarbonization policy operates, and that is from the political, technical, and social point of view. And she will also provide her perspective on European Union and its member state readiness to make the transition happen and what role plays the Czech Republic in the transition. Second speaker is Mr. Philipp Wendel, who is heading the unit in the German Foreign Office, which deals with energy transition. And he will present the current state of play of energy transition from a German perspective. He will also present the work on energy transition during the ongoing European Union Council presidency. Third speaker, Mr. Zbyněk Dubský, assistant professor at the University of Economics in Prague. He will address the impact of decarbonization on European Union external energy relation and reflects the new energy geopolitics. And finally, I will provide you with the recent development of European Union and US LNG trade and spell out a few words on future prospects of transatlantic relationship after presidential election, which will be held on November 3rd, of course, within the context of climate change cooperation. So, as I already mentioned, we don't have much time to spare, so without further ado, I now pass the word to our first panelist, Jitka Holubcová. So, Jitka, please, the floor is yours now.
Thank you, Honza. Good afternoon to everyone. So in my contribution, I'm going to talk about the enablers for the energy and economic transition to happen. Also, I would like to spend some time on shedding the light on the readiness of the member states, and in this case of the Czech Republic, from the point of view of economic, political, and also social point of view. As known, the Czech Republic has not really been a front runner or to an ambitious member state when it comes to the decarbonization policy. One of the reasons might be its emissions. So as seen on the slide number one, the Czech Republic ranks 7th in the statistics of the EU GHG emitters. This is quite an important rank. It's quite high, and it also says that the decarbonization policy will fall a little bit more heavily on this member state than maybe on the others. Also, we have to say that a lot of these emissions are energy related. So for the Czech Republic, there will be a great challenge in adopting the decarbonization policy, not to ruin the current industry and to make a successful transformation towards clean economy. Now back to the enablers for the transition to the clean economy in the EU. Since the adoption of the Paris Agreement, the EU went through a comprehensive revision of its policies, including the energy policy. Today we have a strategy, we have a roadmap. Each member state needed to elaborate its national environmental and climate plans. And we also have the proposal for legally binding rules on the table for the law enforcement purposes. I dare to say that we're really a world leader in this respect. And from that point of view, we're politically set, we're ready. The Czech Republic fulfills its obligations. We have the national plan, and we are ready to meet the 2020 targets. It will be a little bit different story for the 2030 targets. Also, we have to observe the fact that there is a little bit higher administrative burden placed on the especially ministerial staff and associated agencies in processing the agenda and in elaborating the needed analysis, because today in most or a lot of the areas we are not clear on what is ahead of us. For a smaller member state such as the Czech Republic, there is a simple challenge of not having enough staff to process this, and sometimes for that reason we might not have the ability in EU agenda to be more ambitious, more having the thoughts analyzed and so on. What is also needed, a very important enabler for the transition, is the mindset. It's well known that if the citizens are against the transition, then we will not make it work. I see that in many member states of the EU, the citizens are very much ready to go forward and even push the politicians to make the change and to make smarter consumer choices. For some reason, in the Czech Republic, we're not so much ahead, and I think there is work to be done to help the people to be aware of the fact that they should make the choices, they can make the choices, and they should push the government to help them, to enable them to make the choices, smarter choices. Third, the technological readiness. We may be as well politically ready, mentally ready, but we need to have the solutions at hand. For the moment, we do not have all these solutions to meet the needs of the future decarbonized economy. Namely, the decarbonized power generation, the hydrogen production technologies. They're either not existent or they're existent but have or face problems in terms of efficiency or price. I'm talking here about, for example, biological methanation or the cost effectiveness of power conversion to hydrogen. Sometimes we also face limits in the EU in terms of the production capacity. This is the argument the Czech Republic often puts forward, and it definitely will need to be tackled via international cooperation. The European Commission itself said in its statement, I think it was in the European Green Deal, that the new technologies, sustainable solutions, and disruptive innovation are critical to achieve the objectives of European Green Deal. And this statement, I believe, is more critical than we tend to understand. To be more positive, I see that the Czech Republic and the local energy companies already cooperate with other member states in the EU, trying to find solutions for example, decarbonized gases. We're thinking about future use of the current gas infrastructure so that we don't have to face stranded assets. We also talk about building new hydrogen infrastructure. And the Czech Republic and the companies operating in the Czech Republic take good part in this discussion and put forward its ideas and learn from others. I should also mention that in our region, there is already effective cooperation happening as to operation of the power grid, namely the Czech Republic, Germany, Austria, and other associated member states. Last but not least, I would like to talk about investments. So transition to clean economy is definitely opportunity for growth, but investments will be needed. That means EU investments, private investments, and national investments. The Commission itself estimated that just to meet the 2030 targets, there will be need for additional 260 billion euros of annual investment, which is about 1.5 of 2018 GDP. Let's have a look at the slide number 2, where I would like to illustrate that there are still significant differences between the EU 27 member states as to GDP per capita, with the average being in the middle, lined with the blue line. Now, the Czech Republic ranks way below this average. It ranks 18th in the EU, among the EU member states, which makes it potentially even more difficult for this country to make the transition happen and to be inclined to work and invest towards our sustainable future. Nevertheless, the Czech interests, or maybe because of the situation the Czech Republic finds itself in, the Czech interests stemming from this situation should and have to be put forward by the Czech foreign policy to the EU discussion, to the EU decision-making process. But likewise, the Czech Republic needs to be ready via the means of also the international relations to bring back home new ideas and to be willing to rethink the way we use energy, produce energy, and make our consumer choices. From this perspective, we function, we do something, but we need to be focused and work hard continuously to be in the core of the discussion for the future as well. That's all from my side for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jitka, for a very interesting and informative take. You provide us with some, let's say, historical insight in Czech realities. We also heard some challenges this country faces in the field of, let's say, international cooperation in energy matters. Now we move to our neighbor, Germany. Mr. Wendel will provide us with a German perspective on their energy transition. So, Mr. Wendel, can you weigh in? The floor is yours now.
So thank you, Jan. Thank you, Jitka, for your presentation. It was very interesting to hear the Czech perspective. First of all, let me say I would have loved to join you in Prague in person. I would have loved to travel to Prague. And it's a very unfortunate situation that we are all faced with. And I have great sympathy with the population of Prague now. And my impression is that here in Berlin, we will be facing a similar situation in the days to come. So we are all with you in that respect. And we hope that we can soon surmount this challenge of the pandemic. Let me also say that it's a great honor for me to speak to you about energy transition, and also to in some way represent the presidency of the European Council, of the EU Council. It's a great opportunity also to speak to you today, since today the European Parliament voted to increase the climate target for 2030 to minus 60% CO2 emissions. So that's a very ambitious target. They will now enter into negotiations with the member states. But I suppose that in the end of the negotiations, we will be facing a very ambitious climate target. And that's, from my perspective, necessary also, because the goal is, in the end, to become climate neutral by 2050. That's very ambitious, and that requires great progress in all sectors when it comes to decarbonization. I'm convinced that in Europe we have already come a long way when it comes to the power sector. In Germany, we have a share of 52% of renewables in the power sector. So when it comes to electricity, it's rather easy. It's a low-hanging fruit to invest into renewables and decarbonize the power sector. The technology is already there. It requires investment in renewables and in grid infrastructure, but it's possible. And there's also hydropower, photovoltaics, wind power, onshore, offshore. It's possible. The potential is there when you look all across Europe, and when you look at intense cooperation between EU member states, it's possible to entirely decarbonize the power sector. But when you look at the other sectors, in particular transportation, heating, industry, it's more challenging to decarbonize these sectors. When you look at transportation, you basically have a couple of options for individual mobility, especially in cities, but also distances of a few hundred kilometers. My impression is that electromobility will play a key role in that regard. And when it comes to heavy transport, long distance, freight transport, I expect that hydrogen will play a big role in that regard. Also, when you look at the industrial sector, we are in close contact here in Germany with the steel industry and the chemical industry. They already have plans in their drawboards to invest into hydrogen technology. The technology exists, but the regulatory framework does not exist yet to allow this technology to play its role. So hydrogen will really play a big role in the decarbonization of the industrial sector as well. And when it comes to heating, here again, you need to look at different modes of employment. I expect that in big cities, heating from the distance will play a big role, and in individual households on the countryside, heat pumps will be installed on a mass base in the decades to come. All this requires a lot of investment. The European Union, the European Commission is ready to roll out huge investment programs in the European Green Deal. Germany is also ready to invest a lot in the decarbonization of its economy. But we will need a lot of European solidarity, and Germany is well aware of this, and we see this responsibility basically. But in the end, many decisions will be national decisions. When you look at the power mix, I mean, the European Commission will probably not intervene and prescribe certain shares of certain energy carriers. It will be national decisions. In Germany, even decisions of the states, of the Länder. So it's a rather delicate process. It's a crucial process for the implementation of the Paris Agreement. I'm convinced that the technology is already there. It's too expensive for the time being, but once you start investing, prices will drop. We have already seen that with renewables. The price for photovoltaics and for wind energy has dropped significantly in the last decades. Renewables are now competitive with any other source of energy in most regions of the world. They are definitely competitive in Germany, I can tell you. What we need is the right regulatory framework. So first of all, CO2 pricing for all sectors will play a big role. In Germany, we will start CO2 pricing with rather modest prices in 2021 for all sectors not included in the emissions trading scheme of the European Union. Then you also need to look at disincentives for fossil investments. And you will need to look at some kind of border adjustment schemes also when you look at competitors outside Europe. And that's here the debate has really only just started. We will need to find a model which is conform with the rules of WTO, but at the same time that ensures a level playing field of our industry, the industry inside the European Union, with the industries of competitors outside the European Union. As I said, here the debate has really only just started. There are different options on the table, but I'm convinced that in the end, this ambitious European Commission will propose something that will be acceptable to all EU member states. When it comes to our EU Council presidency, of course, Corona has made things a bit difficult. There are no spectacular legislative proposals on the energy sphere currently on the table, but the German Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy has just hosted an energy ministers meeting. They have hosted a big international hydrogen conference, and there will be an energy ministers council later this year in December. And this will pave the way for future presidencies, pave the way for the European Green Deal, and pave the way for a European strategy, also on the path to the next COP in the United Kingdom. So far, just a few introductory remarks. I hope that later on we will be able to enter into a discussion, and I'm already looking forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Philipp, for providing us with the German perspective on the issue. Now it's time to deploy from the international dimension and move beyond the European Union borders. The European Union depends on imports of energy resources from external suppliers. For example, natural gas dependency in the EU reached approximately 80% in 2018. But that may change. The important question is whether changes in energy flows through the decarbonization will strengthen the European Union role or vice versa. This is a topic for Mr. Dubský. So Zbyněk, please, the floor is yours now.
Thank you very much for the word. Good afternoon for all. It's a pleasure to be here and present my ideas about the future of geopolitics of the EU. It's an economic view from the center of the European Union on the external relations in energy flows. My presentation to the 4 sections. First, starting points and questions. Second, EU Green Deal and external relations. And then I would like to analyze the new international order for energy and the potential for the EU as a power actor in international system or in international relations. And finally, I would like to give some questions as a result and possible discussion. I would like to start with starting points. Science, the Industrial Revolution, and geopolitics of energy, including who supplies it and securing access to those supplies, have been a driving factor from my side of view in national and also in international and global prosperity and security. The last decade is characterized by the rapid transformation in energy, renewables and other sources having broken through technological and financial barriers, are competitive, and it becomes challengers to the supremacy of fossil fuels in energy geopolitics. Massive restriction of fossil fuels will have a dramatic impact, maybe on world trade, and change many supply chains. British Petrol, BP, became the first of the early big producers to capitulate to this new reality in this year, and it announced plans to cut oil and gas production 30 to 40% this decade and reallocate assets towards clean energy. However, it still applies. The European Union is an energy importer, and this creates dependency on some regions. At present, the EU imports 55% of its energy. On the other hand, programmatically, European Union is one of the champions of decarbonization with very ambitious goals. It was meant. Over the coming decades, external energy politics of the EU will become much more complex, and in the past, both importers and exporters of energy have used energy as a foreign policy lever. It can be expected that oil and gas will become less important as tool of foreign policy lever, and energy alliances built on fossil fuels will weaken, and in new decarbonized world. I think that new geopolitics of energy reshape world power, and the question is, will the EU benefit or rather lose out from this change? Second slide. I would like to say the strategic significance of natural resources and its connection with geography will be possibly weakened. Such as natural oil reserves are highly concentrated in specific parts of the world. 5 countries in reality account for over 60% of total oil reserves. Sources of renewable powers are less geographically concentrated than oil and gas fields, and similarly, it is expected that strategic oil choke points will become less crucial to the world trade. On the other hand, for instance, the Strait of Hormuz could remain highly relevant also in a low carbon and green economy if renewables, hydrogen produced in the Middle East were to be exported to the European Union. We can expect changes in alliances and new partners. Some share of future energy imports will be low carbon. Decarbonization of the EU will continue to import biofuels like wood or diesel derived from plants. This will be a small part of overall consumption. For the EU, much more significant is the possibility of importing electricity from countries that can produce cheap or cheaper renewable power outside of the EU. For instance, like the sunny regions of North Africa. And with EU support, also today, member states are laying power lines from the Maghreb. We can also expect the new roles for old energy partners of the EU. Today, Russia and Norway sell more hydrocarbons to the EU than any other countries, and most Russian gas and oil is sold to the EU. Hydrogen is the most promising low-carbon energy source for Norway and namely for Russia in the future. Even a green EU will likely keep importing energy from Russia and Norway. At first, it would be blue hydrogen made from natural gas, where the carbon emissions are stored underground or are reused. Eventually, it should be green hydrogen made by using renewable electricity to split water molecules into hydrogen and oxygen atoms. My argumentation is that the aim of decarbonization creates the potential for the EU to become game changer in world politics, and the following reasons can be identified. Firstly, potential strengthening of economic position by protecting its internal market and saving from fossil fuel imports. The EU expects to significantly reduce the 266 billion euro it spends annually on importing fossil fuels. EU fossil fuel demand will decline gradually. European oil demand will decline by 61% from 2018 to 2040. Meanwhile, European gas demand is expected to decline by 38% from 2018 to 2050. At the same time, it's expected gas imports to increase in short term as domestic production declines and coal power plants are closed. The European Green Deal brings many challenges, and I would like to say many things. But the one proposal the most interested for external partners, especially also in the United States, is the idea of implementing a carbon border adjustment mechanism. The mechanism is basically a special new tax on imported goods based on their carbon content. And I think the proposal is reasonable, but however, the proposal can create as many problems as it solves, depending on how it is implemented and how will be accepted by large partners. Second, maintaining the EU's role as a transformative power in its surroundings. Energy still remains an important part for cooperation for many partners from neighborhood of the EU, but it will be no longer necessarily based on the supplier-customer relationship. The European Union can participate in the transformation of this partners' energy sector, combining in particular financial instruments and expertise. And this entails increased influence and the emergence of the new dependencies, and this time in the opposite direction. Third, enhanced role of the EU as a normative power. I think that the implementation of the legal frame of the Green Deal and its expansion towards partners will strengthen the EU's power as a norm setter or as a norm power in international system. The EU will likely be the first of the major powers to achieve carbon neutrality, and making it an interesting test case for others. And the EU sets rules on what is correct and what is normal, and how it is to be implemented. And finally, creating and maintaining technological superiority, a source of a specific form of soft power in international system. Rather, this option seems more hypothetical. If the EU were able to gain technological potential through the achievement of carbonization or decarbonization objectives, which would allow for increased independence while being of interest of other global powers. And finally, results and discussion. The question is, it is the right way to strengthen of the EU position in the world. I mean, decarbonization. Will the EU benefit or rather lose out from this change? And some facts should be taken into account. Firstly, change versus risks. The identified potential of the EU to strengthen its position in the world is associated with many risks. The European Union has decided to pursue very ambitious objectives, especially financially. Their implementation is not fully certain. In many terms, if such radical decarbonization is not carried out by other actors, the EU's position will be weakened. Others will gain a competitive advantage. The retreat from fossil fuels on global level may be slower, and their geostrategic importance will be preserved for some time to come. Maybe we still live in the old world, in the old map for energy. The current analysis of conflicts and also destabilization of entire regions of the EU rather shows that the pursuit of control of over fossil resources and their transport links remains important feature of international relations. We still live in the old world. And finally, the new world, new green world, creates also new interdependencies. Green world does not necessarily mean reducing the EU's energy dependence on the external environment in reality. As a result, renewable energy exporters will always be part of the complexity or of the complex web of interdependencies between importers and exporters, and that would tend to misuse it as geopolitical weapons. And I would like to end my presentation with with one sentence. I think that a zero carbon world, zero carbon future, not do away with zero-sum games in reality. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Zbyněk. Now it's time for my presentation. So I will try to share my screen with you. Hopefully you can see my first slide. So as I already stated, I'm devoting my presentation to transatlantic energy relation with a special attention to growing LNG trade. Number one. Number two, I will also look for energy and climate policy differences between current incumbent Donald J. Trump and his challenger, former Vice President Joe Biden, who promises to bring America back to the diplomatic table over the issue of climate change. The reasoning is that since the challenge of climate change require a global response, the cooperation of two biggest economic blocs will be critical. First, natural gas. It has been already mentioned that let's say the energy dependency of European Union it's large. In natural gas dependency in European Union reached approximately 80% in 2018. So growing LNG trade might be considered as insurance policy against threats to the security of supply through the diversification and with the accelerated, let's say, decrease in indigenous production in the European Union as a consequence of shutdown of Groningen field in the Netherlands and the Brexit, the EU27 will need to import even higher share of gas demand or energy in general. However, besides the fact that LNG trade might enhance the security of supply, natural gas might also be important in the context of clean energy transition, and natural gas might continue to play, at least in the midterm, a key role in replacing coal while helping to, for example, build new hydrogen infrastructure in Europe. According to Frans Timmermans, who is the executive president of the European Commission for European Green Deal, the use of natural gas will probably be necessary to shift from coal to sustainable energy. Regarding LNG, for example, green gases such as bio-LNG or synthetic LNG might be imported directly to the European Union using existing terminals, or terminals might be upgraded and help to bring hydrogen generated outside Europe. Look, and on my next slide, you can see that LNG import from the US have increased substantially. There is a steep increase in the import after the Trump-Juncker agreement in July 2018. It's the first blue arrow on the left side. And as recently as March 2020, the US export to the European Union have dominated the region. The US became the largest LNG supplier to the European Union, taking over the Qatar. However, as a result of COVID-19 virus pandemic, US has lost its market leadership in this region in European Union, and as you can see, the US export of LNG have decreased significantly since then. What are the reasons? From an economic point of view, it made perfect sense to ship LNG, US LNG towards European gas market in the first quarter of 2020. As you can see, there is as you can see from the graph, the spread between major European gas hubs, NBP and TTF, and American Henry Hub were huge. So it is obvious that US LNG, if priced competitively, can play an increasing role in European gas supply. However, the situation, as I already mentioned, changed in the second quarter. The European gas spot prices repeatedly hit values below its American counterpart. You can see in April and in May 2020 that the both European benchmark were below the Henry Hub. So, of course, the general drop can be explained by declining demand due to slowdown of economic activity following the outbreak of COVID-19. However, even though there is a steep drop in US LNG supplies to European Union, LNG is portrayed as additional fuel in a secure and diversified mix in turbulent, let's say, geopolitical times. And on the other hand, LNG is also portrayed as a way to phase out dirtier coal and oil. However, not only use of LNG or use of natural gas might help to achieve at least the midterm climate targets, which are going to be more ambitious than they are now. There is also need to cooperate on the world stage. For this reason, I prepared a very brief list or very brief summary of current president energy policy and the list of let's say policy proposals of his challenger, former Vice President Joe Biden. I start with the Joe Biden. He came up with so-called clean energy revolution proposal or strategy, and he acknowledged that the Green New Deal, which has been introduced by the Democratic Party, is a crucial framework for meeting the climate change. Biden also promised that the ultimate goal is to achieve 100% clean energy economy and reach net zero emission by the mid-century. He also pledged to decarbonize the US electricity sector by 2035. He pledged to install tens of thousands wind turbines, millions of solar panels, and he promised to double offshore wind by the next decade. He also wants to make, I would say, historic investments in clean energy and environmental justice. He pledged to invest $1.7 trillion over the next decade. And finally, he also pledged that he will engage more on the world stage to meet the threat of climate change. Of course, he promised to recommit the United States to the Paris Accord. He also, let's say, pledged that he will become a climate leader. He wants to lead an effort to get every major, let's say, economy to ramp up the ambition of their domestic climate targets. And he pledged that he make these commitments transparent and enforceable. The enforcement of commitments was the big issue also in the Kyoto Protocol for George W. Bush, one of the main reasons why he withdrew from the treaty. However, it is also important to mention that it was Vice President Joe Biden and the President Obama who presided over the largest expansion of fracking on U.S. lands, and subsequently over the largest oil and gas production in U.S. history. And it was also during the Obama presidency when the industry cheered when the government lifted a ban on crude oil export in 2015. Donald J. Trump, the current incumbent, he his, I would say, key policy is energy independence, energy dominance. Under his presidency, the US has increased exports of LNG to all global markets. At the same time, his government on himself, he withdrew from a number of binding international environmental commitments, for example, Paris Climate Accord. He was also tough on unfriendly oil exporters. Venezuela, Iran, the US imposed sanctions on them, used coercive diplomacy. At home, Trump administration lifted numerous environmental and other restrictions on the domestic energy sector, granted permissions to construct new pipelines, Dakota Access Pipeline, or again, well-known Keystone XL pipeline. And he also promoted American energy exports abroad. Regarding the European market, United States seek to limit competition. It is obvious in the European market, especially from Russia. Notably, the Trump administration advocated against the construction of Nord Stream 2, also against the Turk Stream 2. And President Trump made clear that the increase in American LNG imports by European countries would undermine Russia's monopoly of gas supplies. So, if elected, his let's say energy doctrine or the energy or climate policy will be most likely still the American first energy policy, neo-mercantilist, sum zero game worldview. And it is also important to mention that he has no, I would say, explicit climate plan, even though he from time to time addressed the issue of some environmental issues. He's going to most likely impose offshore drill ban in Florida. However, if elected, he won't definitely engage on the global stage. So what is the conclusion of my presentation? Because climate change is a global issue and cannot be tackled in one region only, the response must be, of course, global, and transatlantic cooperation on climate change will be crucial. However, from my point of view, even if Biden wins the elections and he has clear and explicit climate plan, it is not clear whether the US and the European Union would be pursuing common goals, common climate goals. Their steps in the international arena will be very much constrained by the difficult dynamics of domestic politics. It's time for some discussion and questions. I don't see any questions from the audience, so maybe I would go back to Philipp, since he was talking about the German European Council presidency, and I would ask him what does he think? What are the key policy or climate policy? What is the key policy and climate policy agenda the Germany should push forward during presidency, during European Council presidency?
Yeah, I mean, we are now in October, so we only have a little bit more than 2 months left of our presidency. We will definitely push hydrogen as an issue. Yeah, hydrogen is very important for us. We are just starting with hydrogen. The European Commission has published its hydrogen strategy in July. And we hope that we will soon be able to scale up a global market for hydrogen. We see a crucial role for hydrogen to play in the decarbonization of certain sectors such as transportation and heating and industry. But since I work here for the Foreign Office, I also wanted to underline that from our perspective, it's not our goal to become totally independent of our partners abroad, outside Europe. We think that energy has a key role to play to improve the relationships between countries, and that energy relationships are very often mutual dependencies. And this is very much in the interest of security policy and of diplomacy. Europe is now importing large quantities of fossil fuels, and we expect that in the future those fossil fuels will be replaced by other sources of energy, for example, power generated by renewables or hydrogen generated from renewables, or it could be green hydrogen or even CO2 neutral hydrogen from the sources. That's great.
I have one question from the audience. Do we need to massively invest in nuclear and as a current most efficient and non-CO2 emitting energy?
Now, here I'm speaking as a representative of the German government, right? And also not of the Euro Council presidency. Germany has decided to phase out nuclear energy. We think that nuclear energy is not a sustainable and not a secure source of energy. And if you look at the recent statistics, it's also not a competitive source of energy. If you invest in new nuclear plants, it's a very costly investment. And if you compare the power generation costs of nuclear plants with renewables, it's by far more expensive to invest into renewable and to invest into nuclear energy. So I think that nuclear energy doesn't have a big role to play in the future. We will probably see some nuclear plants still ongoing to provide some baseload capacity. But when it comes to new investment, I think the danger is really great that those investments might end up as stranded assets in the future.
Okay, thank you. Jitka, can you?
Okay, I'm trying.
Okay, nice.
Yes,
yeah, we can hear you now.
We're fine.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you, Philipp, for your for providing us with the German point of view, which is very much pertinent. And I tend to agree with the fact that the investment into nuclear power plants might be too costly in today's world, and with more sources coming in and with decarbonization. However, I have to say, as a Czech citizen, that this is left up to the discretion of the member states, which technology they choose in order to assure a sufficient generation adequacy to their consumers. I cannot speak for the Czech state. You as well know that we probably will go ahead with this investment, but I agree with the fact that there's severe risks into this in terms of stranded assets. As to security and safety of operation of nuclear power plants, my personal opinion is that these power plants are quite safe, but that's just a personal opinion.
Okay, Jitka, thank you. Maybe Philipp, you mentioned the hydrogen, that the German government is going to invest, and he see the future in hydrogen besides other. So I would like to ask you what technologies might help with the future flexibility and stability, future energy system based on let's say huge amounts of intermittent energy resources, renewable resources, of course. So what other technologies do you see as future? I don't know, batteries, power to gas technologies, etc. So can you?
I expect that in the end we will be facing a mix of different technologies. First of all, if we provide for interconnectivity between the European grids, if we connect all our grids in a very smart way, and if we invest into renewables across Europe at the same time, then I'm quite confident that in the end you will always have wind farms with heavy wind blowing. You will always have sun shining in parts of Europe, and you can counterbalance that fluidity of renewables that you mentioned. Secondly, the further you go offshore with wind farms, the more secure your baseload of wind energy is. And there's a significant development in the technology of wind farms, floating platforms wide offshore over the high seas that could really replace baseload plants, baseload power plants in the future. Then there will be storage capacities, as you mentioned. Batteries, yes. Also, if you can use water, you can use dams, you can pump up water in the daytime and use the power in the evening or at night. And then also hydrogen will play a role for other sectors, not necessarily for the power sector so much. And even in Germany, we see that a share of more than 70% of renewables is possible in the power grids. It doesn't lead to uncertainty if the share of renewables is so high. We expect that for a few decades to come, we will still need natural gas. We will need natural gas plants in our mix. And that's why we are still investing into gas pipelines. But this is only for an interim period. In the end, in 2050, when we want to reach climate neutrality, natural gas needs to be replaced 100% by other forms of energy.
Okay, thank you, Philipp. It was a nice final remark from you. We are out of time, I see. So I would like to say thanks again to our speakers for very informative and very interesting, let's say, lectures, and also to the audience for attention. Hopefully, our presentation will be beneficial for everybody. Thank you again. Stay safe and healthy in this difficult time, and have a nice rest of the day. Goodbye.